Well, it's great to be here, great pleasure in this eminent group of ruminant specialists. JJ told already a bit about my background. I'm definitely not an eminent ruminant specialist. I have more background in swine and poultry, and these days I also have to work with ruminants, and it's really, really nice and fascinating, especially in the area of sustainability. And let me see. Yep. My talk is about sustainability in general, but I will take you through, in general, through three blocks. One block is dealing with, let's say, sustainability developments, regulatory developments also in the European Union. The second block is more about, let's say, what are really the sustainability, I would say, positives of dairy farming in general and dairy food in general. And then I'll also talk about more the, let's say, the concerns or the areas where we need to do some work. If we talk about sustainability, we have nice definitions, and here you see some definitions, but in general, it is taking care of the people and planet not only today, but also in the future. Famous definition is used often from the United Nations, described by the Brundtland Committee in 1987. You see a picture of Ms. Brundtland here. And I also asked the famous chat GTP what the definition of sustainability can be. Formerly we used the Wikipedia definition often, but you can also ask, okay, chat GTP these days, what is the definition of sustainability? It popped up with this one, and it was actually quite a pretty decent definition of sustainability, which is quite also in line with the Brundtland definition. What's also helping a lot is what the United Nations proposed in 2015. They came up with the Sustainable Development Goals. And it really describes very well what are the key sustainability topics that we have to work on the coming years. You see here the 17 topics, of which some of them are highly relevant for agriculture and aquaculture. Number 1, no poverty. Number 2, zero hunger, good health, well-being, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, so water, taking care of the water ecosystem, life on land. All of these are very important also from our point of view in agriculture and aquaculture. Some of these sustainable development goals have already been translated in global actions, I would say, and Brian already mentioned, of course, the greenhouse gas, let's say, challenge that we have. The world leaders altogether already have agreed that they are going to work on this with the Paris Agreement that was signed in 2016, and you see here the targets of the different, let's say, world leaders or regions in the world with pictures of some of the world leaders. This is, by the way, a dynamic slide. From time to time, I have to replace the world leader who is pictured there. Not sure, Biden I have to replace for sure. Lula came in place of Bolsonaro. The second term of Ursula von der Leyen will probably be there, so I can keep that. And Xi will be there forever until he dies, most likely. So these are really successful targets where world leaders have agreed how they would like to work on this. Talking about regulatory developments, EU legislation is doing a lot on sustainability. You see here some of the a list of some of the regulations that we recently have implemented and that we also can expect in the near future. And quite frankly speaking, it is overwhelming what is already coming towards us and what even will come to us. I asked a colleague of my regulatory department, okay, could you give an overview of all the regulations that are impacting now our business already, that have been recently implemented? But also, please give me an overview of all the regulations that will come up, probably the coming 2 to 3, 4 years, that will impact us. He came up with 35 regulations in total. So we're not yet there. There will be more coming up. And I mentioned some of them here that probably are going to be pretty important for us in the near future. So already there is the Green Deal. Green Deal is also the translation of the Paris Agreement into the European targets to reduce greenhouse gases. You see them here. And later on, the Farm to Fork strategy was defined by the EU committee with quite ambitious objectives for farming in general, for food production. And you see now with the Farm to Fork strategy, here you see the targets that were initially there. So for example, 50% reduction in pesticides, 50% reduction in nutrient losses, 50% reduction, further reduction in use of antimicrobials, and 25% organic farming. These objectives have become fluid already because you see now in Europe, and that's really politics, that the political climate is changing a bit already. You see that populist right-wing parties are gaining in power, and that the EU committee is also looking to the war in Ukraine, putting food security higher on the agenda. So we see already a changing political climate where the politicians become more in favor, a bit more informed, in favor of food production and farming, and not the ambitions that were, let's say, stated here, will all be, let's say, pursued in the near future. Important regulation is the EU deforestation regulation. That is now becoming into force. That will happen. It basically forbids the import of palm and soy from deforested, let's say, areas, recently deforested areas. The cutoff year is 2020. So if soy is produced in deforested areas after 2020, it cannot be imported anymore. And it means for all the producers and traders importing soy and palm into Europe that they have to prove that the soy and palm has been produced on land that has not been deforested recently after the cutoff date of 2020. It's a huge administrative burden for soy producers and palm producers. They are really working hard on this to get it done. We will see if they manage to do that, to get everything in place and comply with it from the 1st of January onwards. And we have a bit our concerns because it will affect maybe the availability of soy that is fully compliant already with the EU legislation on one side. But we also can expect that it may have an impact on the soy market and the soy prices. So you see here regulation that from a sustainability point of view, I think it makes sense. But it will, as said, definitely have quite some impact. Another one is the Green Claim Directive, where the EU comes up with regulation that every claim that we have on a product or, let's say, a program needs to be scrutinized in a way that it is following the guidelines of the European Union and also is well substantiated. So there will be clear directives for that. That's also for our company, for example, meaning that our regulatory department and commercial groups have to really closely review the claims that we make and if they will be in line with this Green Claim Directive. Very important one, and a lot of big, let's say, effort for companies is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. Large stock-listed companies in Europe already have to meet this year, book year, the Corporate Sustainability Directive to meet all the environmental, social governance reporting, let's say, demands that are there. And it's a huge effort. What needs to be done, for example, in a corporate report meeting the requirements is the so-called double materiality assessment, so a kind of a materiality assessment, where each big company, this year already stock listed, has to give their priorities. And you use the so-called materiality assessment. You see an example here of ForFarmers, the largest feed company in Europe. It is a stock-listed company, so they have to do it this year. How that is done, you have to look to the importance for, let's say, society in general, but also look to the importance for your own company as well as the financial importance, how it may affect your business. It's an inside-out view, and it is also an outside-in view that you have to translate into your materialities. It also gives a very nice overview of what kind of priorities these big companies are setting. So this year it's for the big stock-listed company. Next year also Nutreco has to do it because we are a family-owned company. So next year it's our business. We are already people working full-time on this in our company. And also mid-sized company will have to follow soon, as well as companies outside Europe that have a business in Europe from a certain size. They also have to follow the CSRD rules. So you can imagine that this will be a big driver for sustainability goals and sustainability, let's say, pressure on our business as well. These were regulatory developments, but it's not only regulatory what will push us into, let's say, sustainability actions. Also, the retailers have a very big say, of course. Here you see a slide of Albert Heijn, the leading retailer in the Netherlands, looking to the greenhouse gas contribution of animal source food. 99% of Albert Heijn's greenhouse gas comes from suppliers. It's a retailer, so they buy products, sell it again. So if they make an overview of where do the greenhouse gases in that company come from, very little comes from the supermarkets, most comes from the products that they purchase and sell. Scope 3 it's called, and 48% of their greenhouse gas is coming from animal source food. It's quite a lot, so you see here the distribution, which products have the highest contribution in the total. It's in total 13.9 megatons of carbon equivalents. Yeah, and the only way for Albert Heijn to reach this is to ask all their suppliers to reduce the footprint. And they have a target of 45%. So the food processors, the big meat companies, the big dairy companies, the ag traders, they all will be asked to reduce the footprint in let's say, until 2030 by 45%. They will differentiate between product groups. Not for each product group there will be the same target. But these are the guys that are driving the change in our value chain. Similar objectives I could show you from Tesco, Marks and Spencer, Aldi, Lidl, maybe Aldi to a lesser extent, but Lidl for sure. They have those targets as well, and they have to. Also the CSRD obliges them to set those targets. Then the SBTi, it's a voluntary, let's say, participation of companies there. It's not obligatory. This was already implemented before the CSRD came into place. And Nutrico joined this already in 2020. I think we were one of the first animal nutrition companies to join this. It's a so-called Science-Based Target Initiative. Brian already showed it in one of his slides. This is also driving very much the change in greenhouse gas reduction. It means that if you join the SBTi, that you're committed to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement, and you have to follow a certain process, setting your targets, reporting on it, monitoring it, and you really have to prove that you're realizing the targets on greenhouse gas emissions that you have set. It's very much becoming also one of the leading, I would say, platforms to of companies to join and to show that you're really committed to this. So our customers, big customers, also really ask us to join these kind of platforms and report our greenhouse gas emissions according to SBTi and connected platforms like CDP. But retailers also will inform more and more consumers about sustainability of the food products that they sell. Animal source food, you can inform consumers about the nutritional value, that's with the Nutri-Score. I'll show you a nice example of that. The animal welfare of animals, also there you can use different welfare labels and different scores. And what's coming up also, and it's already in France, there is the Eco-Score, which is very much based on the life cycle analysis, assessment done to calculate the environmental footprint in many factors, in many ways. And that's all weighed together in an algorithm, and you get at the end the Eco-Score of a food product. It's now already piloted by some supermarkets, like for example in Belgium, you have the Colruyt supermarket, they already are using it, and also some Dutch retailers are already starting to work with the Eco-Score. These sustainability labels are gaining really in market share. Here you see a view on all the food products in the supermarkets, food service or specialized food shops with certain sustainability label. So you see down below the sustainability labels mentioned here and the increase in market share. And it was growing in a, let's say, almost 10-year period from 8 to 23%. So the market share in food carrying sustainability labels is growing rapidly and can be expected that it will grow further in the coming 10 years. Now, maybe what's less positive maybe for animal source food is that some of these retailers are also having an active policy on reducing the intake of animal protein and promoting the intake of vegetable protein. That was very much driven by a publication in Lancet in 2019. They called it the Planetary Health Diet, where they said if we really would like to take care in the best way for the health of the people and the planet, actually the recommendation is to have 40% animal source-based protein intake and 60% plant-based, whereas it's now, if you would look to the average, 60% animal source of the total protein, 16% comes from animal source protein and 40%. So that really is a shift in this balance. And you see that the long-term goal in let's say, also in the national policies, but also retailers have it in their own internal policies, is to go to this 60% plant-based protein. And there you see some alternatives that can be used. It will not be easy for them. We expect also that it will go slowly, maybe more slowly than they think. Also the Rabobank giving some projections on alternative protein sources is not so optimistic about it, whether their goal will be reached. This from the retailers. So the retailers have a big influence on what we're going to do, what we have to do. The same counts for companies, food processors. This is an overview of, let's say, on the right-hand side of the sustainability topics that are most frequently mentioned in the sustainability reports of big food companies that you see underneath, all in animal source food. So climate change is number one, animal health and welfare is number two, and other topics are feed, food safety, efficient use of resources, circularity, water use scarcity, and biodiversity. You see them highly frequently mentioned, and they have specific also smart targets, these food companies, to work on that. So that will also go into the supply chain as well. You see an example of the priorities of Friesland Campina. So these sustainability reports, and if you gather them together, can give you a really good insight, okay, what are these big food companies heading for in the near future? And the poor farmer comes then, at the end, having to meet all these sustainability demands. So you see an overview of all these sustainability demands that have to be addressed. And if a farmer still looks very positive, eager, and knowing farmers, they are really eager to change if needed, very proactive, they are good entrepreneurs, so I'm confident that in many ways they can manage. Talking about animal source food and about some positives as well as some, let's say, concerns, I first would like to talk about the nutritional value, because this is really, of course, a big positive of dairy products. Nutritional value is excellent of dairy products. Highly digestible, excellent source of protein, various essential nutrients. It's not only about protein, consistent content of nutrients, and mostly it's also hypoallergenic. I have on the picture, I have shrimp, maybe not the best example in that space, but in general, hypoallergenic, if we talk about meat, milk, and eggs. So you see down below some of these, let's say, highly digestible figures compared to plant protein sources. It's very positive. It feeds the world, basically. With the dairy industry and with beef and ruminants in general, but also with swine and poultry, we are feeding the world to a large extent. Here you see an overview of the per capita intake of protein per capita per day. The requirement of adults is about 50 to 60 grams a day. You see that here, that on the dark blue areas, people have enough protein. For a safety margin, you could say, well, maybe people should have an intake of 70 to 80 grams a day. Everything above, that's higher than really requirement. So it could be less, and especially in some countries, some areas with more than 100, it could be also less. But you see that also there are many areas in the world where we have difficulties with reaching these 50, 60 grams of protein per day. And these areas are really important. Livestock, let's say, livestock food supply, protein supply are really critical for these areas in the world. The FAO wrote a nice report about the contribution of animal source food from a nutritional point of view. You see that here on the left-hand side, you see the cover of that slide. They also mentioned some of the World Health Assembly targets about preventing some of the problems that are still quite relevant in the world in areas where they have a shortage of food insecurity. And stunting and wasting in children and maybe also low birth rate are really World Health Assembly targets that we would like to lower in the future. And livestock and animal source foods are really important in that space. So it's saying there's no doubt about the value of livestock. It's only maybe about in the Western world where we have more than 100 protein a day that you could say, okay, there we could maybe consume less. Then the Nutri-Score about the nutritional value. It's actually quite funny. I had a look in it recently. Because the full-fat milk has a Nutri-Score of C. It was downgraded recently by a committee, scientific committee. You see the cover of that report on the left-hand side. There is an algorithm to calculate the Nutri-Score of products, and it's based on protein content, it's based on the energy content, it's based on amount of sugars, salt, and fibers inside the product. And then you come to a score, and milk was placed in the category of beverages. Now, water has a Nutri-Score A. Milk has a Nutri-Score C, full-fat milk, mainly because of the fat level and the amount of saturated fats inside. And Coke Zero has a Nutri-Score of B. So if your kid in the morning, it's better to give the kid in the morning a zero sugar Coke than a full glass of full-fat milk. This is happening, I know. But my point is, as dairy industry, you have to be on top of these kind of things. You have to really be in the space active where they are talking about these kind of scores and where they are at the end deciding about how to score and how to communicate this with consumers. The positive thing is also consumers hardly look at it. If you review or research the buying behavior of consumers, it's not heavily influenced by the Nutri-Score. So the counteraction of the dairy industry is also to look to, okay, what is really the nutritional value of milk? I like this one. It was recently published on LinkedIn. It was made by Royal Aware, a dairy company in the Netherlands. They used a paper of Singh Pavel, recently published, comparing milk with all the alternatives. And to have the same protein intake as milk, you need 2 glasses of soy drink, 8 glasses of oat drink, 58 glasses of almond drink, and let's say the corresponding footprint is mentioned there as well. So these kind of communications, of course, help to emphasize a bit the nutritional value of milk and dairy products, but you also have to take into account at the end, we're already eating enough protein. So talking about nutritional value and Nutri-Scores and whatever, it's all about, at the end, a balanced diet. And for me, this is really important to emphasize that on and on. It's all about a balanced diet, not eating too many kilocalories and exercise. And dairy products fit in very well in a well-balanced diet with a high nutritional value and positive health effects. Another very positive area for dairy is the conversion of human non-edible proteins into edible proteins. So just mention here on the top, on the right-hand side, this is a Belgian research looking to, okay, how many edible protein goes into the cow and how many edible protein is produced by the cow. And you see that about 3.5 more edible protein output comes out of a cow, which is very positive. The second thing is what we recently worked on in the Netherlands is also, okay, let's look to the amount of circular ingredients in feed, in compound feed. And we defined the circular ingredient as rest and byproducts or former foodstuffs that are coming back from supermarkets or food processing companies that are not fit anymore for human consumption, but still fit for animal consumption. And rest and byproducts are products with a rather low economical value. So soybean meal, and that's important thing to mention. If you have a soybean and you produce soybean oil and soybean meal has an economic value of the total of 60%. So our definition was it should be less than 50% before we can classify it as a rest or a byproduct. So soybean meal was not classified as a byproduct. This is out of scope of this one. It's human non-edible, but we did not define it as a rest or a byproduct. So what you see then that the ruminants are still scoring very well on the percentage of rest and byproducts and former foodstuffs, so the percentage of circular ingredients in compound feed in the Netherlands is not taking silage into account, better than swine and poultry. Poultry still uses quite a bit of cereals and soybean meal. Other topic, competition for feed and food, often mentioned by NGOs, land use, used for dairy production or beef production that could be used for crop food production. Also there, the competition from my point of view is limited. There's in total 5 billion hectares of arable land in the world, and recently this papers suggested that only 0.7 billion hectare is convertible to crop production that is suitable for food, human food production. So this is definitely a topic that you hear often, but in reality, is this really a topic that we should be very much concerned about? Currently, it's not a topic. Maybe in the future, if there's not significant growth in arable land, whereas the food demand will significantly grow, it may become a more evident problem. But I don't think it's really a problem at the moment in relation to food insecurity. Food insecurity, and you can read that easily in many documents, and I think there's a really good overview every year of hunger hotspots in the world. If you talk about really food insecurity problems in the world, it's not caused by feed-food composition, it's mainly caused by conflicts. Where for example, in South Sudan, people do not have enough food, and food aid cannot reach the people that need it because of all the instability there, and the rebellions there are not allowing food aid to reach the people. So this is really a big problem, and still, of course, sometimes extreme weather conditions can also contribute, but that's something there. Livestock farming can also help us very much to get out of poverty, and I show you here a slide of from my own, let's say, life. I used it at the inaugural lecture. My roots are in Odilia Pale. That area there on the left-hand side, the top side, was a strip of about 15 by 30 kilometers. It was non-cultivated land. And my grandfather got a grant from the government to settle in that area, build a farm. He raised a family of 14 children, a good Catholic family. And he started with a few cows and a few pigs and a few chickens. And from there on, he developed the farm. And you see here the first, let's say, pictures from that era with the farm, the family farm where my brother still lives. And really in those areas, it helped a lot to grow in prosperity and have some economic growth. After the World War, the government heavily promoted the scaling up of animal production and specialization of farms. And this area, the Pale, became in about 3 decades one of the most animal-dense areas in the world, with pigs and poultry and dairy cows. It was a huge development, which also led to sustainability problems with excess in manure, excess in nitrogen and phosphorus emission into the environment. It was a big problem. I'll come back to that later. But it definitely helped for many people in that region to get out of poverty, and still is in many developing countries the case, of course. Livestock helps to get people out of poverty, and we have to help them. And I think the projects that Brian showed in India are nice examples. Help them to get into poverty, to develop, but do it in a sustainable way. We have to take the lessons into account that we already learned here. Talk now more about the right-hand side. I'll go rather quickly through it because of time. But I start with welfare. It still is a topic that we need to address. I like very much the talk about animal welfare, the definition that was given or what we need to do from the Raad of Dierenaangelegenheden. It's an advisory committee for the government in the Netherlands with different stakeholders, scientists and people from different, let's say, institutes. And you see that what the basis is really recognition of the intrinsic value of animals. That's the basis. Then on top of that, good nutrition, good environment, good health. Also, the need for animals to be able to explore the natural behavior. And then at the end, of course, we would like to reach a positive emotional status of the animal, which I translated into the happy cow picture on the right-hand side. So there are certainly some welfare topics for dairy production that we need to tackle. You see some of them that are on the agenda in the Netherlands. It's the early weaning of calves, the separation of calves from their mother. It's about productivity-related disorder diseases, grazing cows. Consumers would like to see grazing cows. The comfort and space, the richness in the environment, and the longevity is also a very hot topic in animal welfare. And it is translated also in animal welfare labels, and there are different levels. So you see here examples of labels where they pay attention to animal welfare and dairy in the Netherlands. We have the Beter Leven, let's say, label, which is the most popular label in the Netherlands, especially for swine and poultry. So far, less in dairy cows, because there are more other labels there already in place. But you see there are different levels, and they all relate to the level of space, the level of comfort, can they graze, how many days can they be outside, how to treat the calves, and so forth. And you see on the right-hand side, this is really a welfare label, but these are broader labels on this side, but also including animal welfare aspects. We are not yet there, because what happens in the media is also very important, and this is really important. Talking about animal welfare is the emotional framing of things. A year ago, you could watch an advertorial block of 5 minutes, and you could see on one side the advertorial of Wakker Dier, an NGO that is quite active, addressing really, you can see in the picture, a confined cow, drowning in its own milk, poor longevity. They really were hard on the dairy production side. And as a response, the young farmers in the Netherlands, dairy farmers, came up, Nederlands Agrarisch Jongerencontact, with another, let's say, feel-good commercial. Farmers love their cows. You see a young farmer hugging a cow. That is really a response. So it was a kind of a feel-bad advertorial and a feel-good advertorial in the same advertorial block. But my point is here, this emotional framing and storyline is very important for addressing animal welfare issues. It's not only about the science, it's also about this. So coming more towards the environmental part, you see here on the left-hand side the amount of nitrogen deposition in kilos per hectare, which rose from the 50s until the 90s very much. Ammonia emission, huge. Then the measures came into place to reduce it, and the reduction also was significant, about, I think, in total, if you look to the pictures, it's about 60-70% reduction. And also the amount of nitrogen and phosphate that was used on arable land has been reduced significantly there. Ammonia emission is mainly nowadays a problem from the ruminant side in the Netherlands. So swine and poultry farmers have invested heavily in housing systems with air washers. So ammonia emission is there controlled to a large extent. And the main ammonia emission now comes from dairy farmers. They have done already quite a bit, but they still need to do more. Final topic, and I will go quickly through it because there will be really good stuff coming next on more on the technical side, what you can do in this. But this is an overview of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world. Nice picture from the FAO, where you see quite clearly that Latin America and Asia are the main contributors to greenhouse gas in the world. My point is, yes, we have to work in the Western countries on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and it will, of course, improve climate at the end. But we should keep in mind that the possibilities or opportunities in Africa and Asia to work on this will be limited. So it's still the agenda will be there, of course, highly dominated by food security, by food prices, by food safety, and at the same time maybe we can do a bit on having a sustainable farming system, but it's not per se that they will implement, of course, greenhouse gas reduction policies. Greenhouse gas carbon footprint is calculated by life cycle assessment. In total, there are 16 categories which are calculated from a life cycle assessment, and a carbon footprint is one of them. And what we find of those 16 most important, and that's also probably what we have to declare on feed in the coming years, are the ones mentioned here on the left-hand side. Climate change, acidification, eutrophication, land use, water use, and particulate matter are the ones that most likely we will have to report and also transfer information to the next stages of the chain. But for now, and really the most important is the carbon footprint from let's say, all the regulations and all the market demands that we have. Talking about the carbon footprint composition, where does it come from? 40% of the carbon footprint of milk comes from feed, 30% from methane. There is also emissions from the slurry that the cows or the beef producing. It's very different in feed, the feed contribution compared to eggs and broiler chickens. There it is about 80%. And also in swine it's higher than in dairy, it's about 60%. But in swine also the manure part is a big source of greenhouse gas emissions. What has already been realized in dairy farming in the Netherlands? Well, we already reduced it over the last 30 years by 35%, the carbon footprint. And the main reason why we reduced it is the productivity increase. You see the milk production going from 6,000 to 8,800 in 2019. We had also a lower replacement rate, so also the longevity of cows improved a lot, which also helps to reduce the carbon footprint quite significantly. And feed efficiency went up. To reduce the footprint, we can do a lot. So you see in the beginning here that we already reduced it by the 35% from 1990 to 2020. Going further down to a level further 30% reduction. There are different scenarios possible. We're not going into detail. Low carbon footprint use of in feed. Improvements in silage quality can help a lot also to reduce the level of compound feed. Entering methane inhibitors, efficiency, longevity of cows can help. Working on the manure treatment, less fertilizer, and finally also green energy. The main ones, as I've shown already in the beginning for dairy, is really on the feed side as well as on the enteric methane side, and longevity and productivity. So we have tools for that to help you with your carbon footprint reduction strategy. And I missed here carbon removal. So when is it really going fast? It's really going fast when on one side farmers are paid to reduce their carbon footprint, and when farmers also have to pay taxes, like in Denmark, it's going to be the case with carbon taxing of dairy farmers. They may have to pay €100 per dairy cow. It's going really fast. So with this environment, like in Denmark, I gave it as an example. So there's maybe a reward, a bonus system in place. On the other side, there may be a real malus system in place, and then it goes really fast. What also will come up with the dairy farms of the future is more investment in manure treatment. There are still many opportunities with manure for biogas production, for maybe separating manure into fractions that you can use in a more targeted way as replacement of chemical fertilizers. But this is really happening in the Netherlands as well. These technologies become better and better and more affordable, and I expect that that will be one of the ways for the future. You also see that these manure treatment technologies have a positive impact on reducing ammonia emission and methane emission at the same time. Regenerative farming is really a big opportunity for dairy farmers. Maybe not from a carbon credit point of view. If you look to dairy farmers in the Netherlands with just 30, 40 hectares for 100 cows, this is not really bringing them the big money. It's more an investment in, let's say, I want to do as a farmer something for nature. I want to have a better image in the, let's say, in the neighborhood. I really would like to work on this. And you see that Dutch farmers, many of them, especially young farmers, are investing in this just really because they really would like to do it and are paying the cost for it themselves. So sustainability at the end, yeah, with all the demands, it's going to be much more and more an optimization model. You have many variables there that you need to optimize at the farm. We, of course, would like to help our customers with that. And it's also an optimization process with many trade-offs inside. So if you go for the lowest footprint, you may have more nitrogen and phosphate emission on the other side. If you go for regenerative farming, you may lose some crop yields. So how much is that going to be? Is it worthwhile? Is it possible to do it? These kind of questions will rise. Finally, that's the fun element at the end, JJ, and then I will close my session, my presentation. My daughter is studying landscape architecture and she has ChatGPT, and I asked ChatGPT, okay, with the prompt, could you design for me the dairy farm of the future, meeting all the future sustainability demands? It's a bit of fun exercise. For the rest, I didn't tweak it. You see there what it came up with, and actually it was quite nice what it showed. It said you need cutting-edge technology, renewable energy sources, large, comfortable open spaces for the cows, something in green vertical gardens, vegetation for natural installation, state-of-the-art technologies, artificial intelligence, minimal emissions, support biodiversity. Great. And this is the picture that it came up with. I didn't, as I said, I didn't tweak it, but it's really fun to see how ChatGPT looks at the dairy farm of the future. Okay, so I would like to thank you. I'll be open to change. That's my main message here, because things will change definitely. Be open to change. Be active in the sustainability field. And a famous statement of one of the Star Wars characters, "May the Force be with you." Thank you very much.